Hello everyone, Добрий день, Україно, Gamarjava, Georgia. My name is Art Antonyan. I'm happy to present Burhan Sönmez, a Kurdish Prize-winning novelist from Turkey, author of 5 novels. He's the president of PEN International, elected in 2021. Burhan is a human rights lawyer and activist. Burhan is joining us from Cambridge today. Hello, Burhan. Thank you for being with us.
Hello, Art. Hello.
Burhan, I'm glad to welcome you as a speaker at the International Literature Festival Odesa. Usually this festival takes place in one of the most beautiful Ukrainian cities, Odesa. But because of Russia's brutal attack on Ukraine, this year the festival is held in Batumi in Georgia. We're very grateful to our Georgian colleagues for that. Burhan, I'd like to start our conversation with your speech right after being elected as president of PEN International. You cited the words of the first PEN president, John Goldsworthy, who at the first PEN dinner, which happened on the 5th of October 1921, lifted his glass to writers from all corners of the world and said, "We writers are in some sort trustees for human nature. If we are narrow and prejudiced, we harm the human race." So my question is, how big is the role of literature concerning freedom? Is a writer powerful enough to influence nations, to raise awareness, to change the way governments act?
Thank you very much, dear Art. It's wonderful being here. And also, it is maybe a sad moment instead of having this conversation in Odessa, just having it here online. But I hope next year we will be able to meet in Odessa with people. That will be, that will be the greatest achievement in the coming year. When we talk about literature and writers, there are so many things to say. Let's start from a simple point. I'm a writer. I'm not a big person. You write a book, Art, We have many people. We just stay at home. We have a small room, small desk, pen and paper on computer. Then we just send it out to publisher and they publish it. But then suddenly, some big guys from the government or some other strange groups, they come and they say that you are doing something dangerous, okay? And then you find yourself as a target of, big plot. But you know that you're not part of that world. You're not in politics. You're just in writing, literature, reading, and sharing your feelings, your thoughts, and your imagination with other people. When you think that you are a simple person, some other forces say that, no, you are not a simple person. Whatever you are doing is a big thing. Then you start to realize that whatever you do on your own at home, or in a small room, has a big impact in this world. That means everything is connected in this world. Everything affects each other. That's why we feel that big responsibility of writing. When 101 years ago, writers started to come together, starting in London, then spread out other countries, they formed PEN International. And immediately they realized that writing is not only writing in this world. It's also a matter of freedom of expression. Because in the beginning of 1930s, especially with the rising of Nazism and fascism, when they started to organize these big burning parties starting in Germany, people realized that books can be victimized. Yeah, they can be demonized. Then our job here, not only write a good book, also to defend those people who write good books and also to defend those good, beautiful books. We are here.
That's a very good, beautiful answer. Thank you so much, Burhan. Right now, I would like to ask a general question about PEN, because I'm sure that there are lots of people who are not writers and they don't know what PEN is. So what is PEN? Why does this planet need the Worldwide Association of Writers? And what are main principles, goals, and activities of PEN International?
The PEN International, as I said, now completed its first century. We are in the first year of our second century. It was founded by English writer Catherine Amy Dawson Scott, and the first president was John Goldsworthy, a Nobel laureate English writer. Since then, we support writers and PEN centers across the world Currently, we have more than 140 pen centers in more than 100 centers with 40,000 members. We always defended writers. We have two main and plus one aim. The one is promote literature. Secondly, defend freedom of expression. Thirdly, to create the solidarity, a solidarity of environment among writers. This is our main aims, and we've been working to achieve this for 100 years now.
Just to give some examples, this is the theoretical information about PEN International, but I would like to name two names, actually. The first one is Salman Rushdie, writer, and also I would like to name WikiLeaks founder and publisher Julian Assange. Though it may seem obvious and on the surface, could you explain why is it important to speak about people like Rushdie and Assange? I know that, of course, both of them are supported by PEN.
For the first example, Salman Rushdie wrote a book. We can simply say, if you have an opinion, just share it. If you don't like it, then share your own opinion against it. Don't resort to violence or hate speech. That's the line here. Salman Rushdie published a book. People liked it. Some people didn't like it. That's it. If you didn't like it, write something else. Otherwise, you cannot stop it. You couldn't stop Socrates. He was executed more than 2,000 years ago. Still, we read Socrates. Violence cannot stop the imagination, the power of dreaming, the power of creation. It's impossible. On the second example of Julian Assange didn't do anything, just shared some facts about some secret operations, mainly managed by big powers like states, governments, or big corporations. Now they say that this is against state security. What is state security? Who decides? Public, journalists, or some legal bodies in the government? In this case, Julian Assange did what every free journalist could do. And that's why we support his case, and also, of course, Salman Rushdie's case.
I intentionally wanted to mention these names for people who are not familiar with PEN activity, for them to understand which kind of cases are on the focus of PEN International. By the way, we are speaking right now, and in 52 minutes, the Nobel Prize award will release the name who's going to get the Nobel Prize. We mentioned Salman Rushdie. Do you think Salman Rushdie will get it, or do you have any, I don't know, idea or prediction, or what do you think about that? Who's going to get the Nobel Prize? This Nobel Prize guess is a game to lose always. Of course, I understand. Everyone, we mention certain names, and we always get surprised with some other good names. Last week I was in Sweden with the chair of Nobel Prize Committee, Per Wasberg. We were in an event together. I chaired, and then we had a dinner together. Of course, I tried to get some words from his mouth. I asked him many questions, but he had a tight lip. He didn't say anything. That's very respectful. There are very good names we wish to win. I have many good writers in my mind. I hope one of them will get the award this year. Okay, that's a mystery, but not for a long time, because right after we finish, 15 minutes to go, and then we'll know the winner of the Nobel Prize. Okay, Art, have you received any phone call this morning from Swedish Academy? Not yet. Unfortunately, not yet, Have you? Oh, not yet. That means, okay, maybe next year. You are much closer to the Nobel Prize than I am. I have a long way to go still and to do in my life. Now, let's get back to the freedom of speech. My personal opinion is that freedom of speech has always more or less been under threat and probably will be. You have a tremendous experience, Burhan, in the field. So what are the main threats to freedom of speech in the modern world? Who or what is the biggest enemy of freedom of speech?
Yeah, there are traditional threats like government's policies. Mainly, they arrest you, they put you in prison, or they break your pen, they censor you, or they create a big environment of fear. They assassinate you, directly or indirectly, by using certain paramilitary groups. These are the things we've been witnessing for hundreds or thousands of years. And now we see that there are some new threats. Now new challenges are coming, like surveillance, or hate speech, or fake news. These are maybe been around all the time, but at the moment we can say that the 21st century creating a big institution around those new challenges. They are not just simple, small facts or examples happening in that or this corner of the world, but this is something substantial, and we have to address this substantially.
Actually, you already mentioned the thing I want to ask you in the next question. From one point of view, almost everyone has a cell phone and may express his or her opinion or report on anything. From the other, all these gadgets, technologies, and instruments are used by governments to control and brainwash their population, and that means even bigger control. How do we fight propaganda? And on both levels, like on the level of PEN International, for example, I don't know if you're doing anything to fight propaganda. Of course you do if you support some case and you want to give truthful information to the audience. And on a personal level, like first PEN International level and then personal level, like you, as if you're not the president, just a writer, a person even. And how do we fight it?
I think you cannot ban or stop, fake news or hate speech, in an easy way. And the main thing we need is to create a bigger power for the truth. We have to insist, we have to spread the word, and we have to fight fake news openly. Just ignoring it or just underestimating it is not good enough for us. The power of truth is still in our hands. We have to support the international institutions, the basis of law in countries, and the activities of writers and readers and all citizens, in defense of truth. What is truth? Truth? There is not a truth. The truth starts with freedom. Okay, give people freedom to respect each other. The hate speech users use mostly now this discourse. They say that this is my freedom of expression. Hating people is not freedom of expression. We have to make it clear. Spreading fake news is not freedom of expression. It is something undermining freedom and democracy now everywhere. It's not in global South. It's now in North America. It's now at the heart of Europe. That means that this is a global issue. We have to address it globally altogether.
This is a big challenge, and I'm sure that humanity will have to learn even how to fight modern propaganda and manipulation. So we don't have to go far, right? We just need to take a look at the Russian Federation and what they did with their population first, and then with all the other countries surrounding the country, right? People in Russia under a big pressure of propaganda, and they sometimes they can't say where is white color, where is black color? You know, they're interchangeable, and they're interchangeable for the sake of government statements, for the sake of government goals. It's a really big question. Next, I'm gonna quote you, your words. So the beginning of the quote: human rights, democracy. If you like that kind of terminology, then you are labeled as the enemy of the state. So I have been an ordinary citizen of Turkey, which means I've been detained and tortured and then tried to kill. End of the quote. Were you being modest by saying I've been an ordinary citizen of Turkey? Or is it because the scale of assault was that big in Turkey, in the 90s, I guess, that almost anyone could become a victim of government force machine?
I think the second part is better explaining my situation or the situation of people in Turkey. I used to be a human rights lawyer. I was active in human rights issues now, as I do, as a writer. But in Turkey, this is not something that's being done by a few people, by a few writers or lawyers or academics. When I was at university in 1980, there was a military coup. Just give you some numbers. The official figure of people who were arrested, that means continuously tortured in detention centers, was 650,000 people. That means unofficial number was over 1 million. That was 40 years ago. I was a teenager. Then came 1990s. I was a young lawyer, and it was the peak time of Kurdish civil war. Apart from casualties from fighting parties like Turkish army and Kurdish resistance movement, only people who were murdered on the street, assassinated, was 17,000. So I was just one of them who luckily survived. So that's why my case, or this kind of cases, are not something very special or unique. It is a social element. It's a social issue in Turkey and many similar countries. That's why when I talk about that kind of things, I always would like to address the social and the political aspect of this issue. We have to address it properly, on legal basis, on human rights basis, on democratic values basis.
So back in the history in Turkey, which is not so long ago from the historical point of view, you didn't actually have to do anything special. I mean, I don't mean to diminish your activity, because you were really a human rights activist and a lawyer. You were really in the process of protecting people and fighting for the human rights. But actually being just a citizen of Turkey some 30, 40 years ago was very dangerous, just going on the streets. Did you need to join some kind of protest to get hurt and assaulted by police forces? Or was it like right now in Russia, you don't even have to protest. You can be by yourself going, and if you wish to say something, or at least to hint, people are raising their hands without even piece of paper, without nothing in their hands, and they're being arrested, detained, and hit by police forces. What was the situation right at that time in Turkey, and how it is right now?
Yeah. Now I think we can all imagine the difficult situation of peace defenders in Russia. You have a dictator at home, and who kind of cast a spell over society, using that populist language and glorifying the war. And you just say that, no, I want peace. I don't want to die, and I don't want to kill people. And you find yourself either in prison or in graveyard. That's the worst case situation for us. In Turkey, when I was a young lawyer, of course I was an ordinary lawyer who would go defend, human rights defenders, political prisoners, and join the human rights associations activities. That's it. That's enough to make you an enemy of the state. And today, maybe it's easier to become the enemy of the state. if you share some sentence on your Twitter account criticizing, let's say, the economic policy of the government, okay, you can find yourself in prison just because of some sentence. Turkey's greatest musician, Fazıl Say, was sentenced imprisonment because he didn't write anything. He retweeted someone else's tweet, and in that tweet, they didn't write anything new. It was just a few lines taken from a mystic Persian poet who lived 1,000 years ago. This is Turkey, this is the situation. But people still writing on Twitter, they go on street, and they never step back.
I thought something like that could happen only, in the North Korea or Russia, but you're actually saying that retweeting some words, a quote from 100 years ago, you could end up in jail in Turkey right now, in the modern Turkey. Okay, wow. That's a surprise.
Art. Unfortunately, this. Okay, now it's easy word to use populist policies. Populism now everywhere. It's in Russia with Putin, in India with Modi. In Philippines with Duterte and now Marcos. With Bolsonaro in Brazil. In Hungary with Orban. Now coming in Italy. With Meloni, and in Turkey, everywhere. And in, let's say, developed European countries, these policies also now rising. They are gaining power and support in public. This is a real global danger that we have to address.
Let's get back to the moment, which is, of course, not a pleasant for you when you were assaulted by, I think, police forces. You had to leave Turkey to get a proper treatment in the United Kingdom, and actually for the sake of your life, as I understand. And you lived in the United Kingdom for 10 years. And yet, after everything you had been through, you go back to Turkey and live in Istanbul again, or I'd rather say between Cambridge and Istanbul. Why did you go back, and how do you feel now when you are in Turkey? Do you feel safe there?
No one feels safe in Turkey. If someone says that I feel safe, that means that they don't see the reality or they lie, simply. But facing danger is not a matter of safety or bravery. It's your country. And you want to be part of your country, because your country is not just a simple place on the map of the world. It is part of your memory. It's in your mind, in your imagination, in your spirit, in your soul. You are always with it. Even you try to run away from it, it will come and catch you up. When you go back to your country, after long years, you know that, okay, it's not a safe place for you anymore. Throughout your life, you will always feel that big danger, just hanging over your head. But that's part of your life. You have no choice, and you have to manage it. You have to manage it bravely and wisely.
Since Russia attacked and started bombing the whole territory of Ukraine in the end of February, there have been protests in Russia, but they weren't really numerous if we compare some thousands of protesters in the whole country with the number of population, which is more than 140 million people. And even lately, when military mobilization was announced, hundreds of thousands decided to flee the country without protesting. Maybe my question will not be wise, taking into account that you are an activist and you have a lot of experience in that. But I'm still going to ask you this question. Do you believe in the power of mass protests? Could Russians, ordinary Russians, stop the war that their government started?
Yes, I believe this power. Let's see what happened in Romania last year. What happened a couple of months ago in Sri Lanka. And I believe that this has an effect. And in case of Russia, personally, I can say that the protest in Russia is much wider and bigger than we hear on the news channels, because most of them cannot be shared on social media or TV news channels. But from our contacts, we hear and we know that the protests are bigger than known.
We understand, I guess, of course, well, to some extent what's going on right now in Russia. And me personally, I understand because I used to live in Moscow. I studied in Moscow. I worked in Moscow. I lived in Moscow for 7 years. And I know I left Russia in 2017. But even back in the day when I moved to Moscow, it was 2010. Right away, I understood and I felt drastic difference between Ukraine and Russia, that in Russia, I feel more uncomfortable being on the streets. If in some other countries, for example, in Europe, when I would see police people, I would normally react okay, because they are for the sake of, for our sake, for just normal people walking on the streets, for safe streets, But in Russia, in most of the cases, I would see police people and I would start feeling uncomfortable right away, because that's a police country, and it was becoming more and more watched, controlled, and oppressed. But so we understand why people are afraid to protest. But what would you say to the Russian people? I understand it's no good to say, hey, go protest. We're not going to do that. We're responsible for our own lives. They're responsible for their own lives. Like, each person has the right to decide. But what would you say to the Russian people if you had an opportunity to address them on a larger scale?
In this kind of situations, the best thing, I think, not to call those people to do something. They know what to do and what not to do. The thing I would tell them that we are doing things with you and for you. You are not alone in Russia. Okay? People from other countries, writers, journalists, or ordinary citizens of this world, we are with people of Russia against this despotism, coming with the power of Putin. This is something very important. I'm sure people who are struggling, they will create the best ways of resistance. Let me just give you an example. I read some years ago, in Nazi Germany in 1930s and during the Second World War, there was no opposition left. Everyone murdered, oppressed, or exiled. But still there was resistance. People wanted to do something. In one of the leaflets, an illegal group spreading in the cities of Germany, you know what they asked people to do? They didn't ask them to demonstrate or to do big action. They just said that when you see a Nazi officer on the street, look at them in their eye, and they should feel that they are not being loved in this society. That's an action sometimes. Just a look in your eyes. And this is something only those people who are living in this country can decide how to do it. Our job is to show that they are not alone. We will never leave them alone in this world.
Yeah, I understand. And, some people are saying, like, I understand their emotions too, that they're saying like, oh, forget about Russia and we just have to close it, like, to build walls or anything. But of course, it doesn't work like that. So you cannot just put walls around even a small country, and not speaking about the biggest country on the planet. Of course, all the problems should be reserved, must be reserved. And something really big must be changed, of course. Okay, let it be like this. Let's go back to Turkey, if you don't mind. I'm going to actually ask you about the freedom of expression and information in modern Turkey. Let's imagine this situation. Early in the morning, you go to a nearest cafe in Istanbul to enjoy a cup of coffee with a fresh newspaper, and it's a big independent newspaper. I underline it's a big newspaper, independent newspaper. And this newspaper published an editorial, let's say, about the rights of the Kurdish people and their state in modern Turkey, or about Armenian genocide. And this editorial has all sorts of opinions, and even those which are completely not comfortable for the government and for the political elite. Is that possible in modern Turkey or not?
Oh, it is less and less possible because they will immediately be targeted. For example, Armenian genocide. If you use that word in a big newspaper, okay, you should be ready, for big problems. And most of the people, curb the words. They say Armenian affair or Armenian issue, Armenian incident. But it was genocide. It is a historical fact, reality. But the official discourse, unfortunately, totally erasing this terminology. And it's
the same like the Russian government says, not war, but special operation.
Oh, yes. It's a great invention. Americans came into Iraq, killed 1 million. They called it operation. Unbelievable. This is the 21st century. In Turkey's case, and the danger is not only something about governments. If they get a strong support in public, that's a bigger problem. Unfortunately, on the Armenian issue especially, and now on Kurdish issue, the majority of public siding with the government's nationalist discourse. This is something we have to fight. I can criticize Erdogan or his government or Turkish military, and I can face going to prison. But how I'm going to change the whole society? That's why the power of word, for the sake of truth, is so important. We have to insist on it. We have to write. There is no way to stand back. If you retreat, that means you are retreating in the history. Okay, sometimes moving forward is too expensive to pay a price. But we have to face it sometimes. Not everyone, but some people. Yes, that's our job.
When you were a boy, and later a big part of your life, the Kurdish language, music, and literature were absolutely, or at some point, almost forbidden in Turkey. What is the state of the Kurdish population in the country right now?
It is not so bright. In daily life, the anti-Kurdish sentiment is rising and rising. This is especially promoted by the government, military, police. Just let me give you a simple example. I'm not talking about Kurdish, political leaders who have been in prison 5 years. All democratically elected Kurdish mayors are now in prison. I'm not talking about this. Istanbul, one of the biggest metropolis in the world, with 17 million population. There are Kurdish youngsters, boys, girls singing on the street. Every week they are being arrested. And then it becomes viral on social media. Then every week artists and writers come in support of them. Then following week, they are being arrested again. And they are being warned, they are told that they should stop singing in Kurdish. Why? How? More than 20 million Kurds live in Turkey. This is, we are not talking about despotism, authoritarianism. We are just talking about simple logic here. And if a society is losing its logic, that means that it's losing its future.
I hope the situation will be better. I don't know when. I'm a very naive person sometimes, and that's an intentional thing. You know, I always try to believe in better things. I hope that your people will be able to sing anytime in any language and any kind of songs whenever they want. I actually want to go a little bit and mention your personal life because your personal story is outstanding. A Kurdish boy born in a distant village without electricity, if I'm not mistaken, that's what I read, in Anatolia, grows up and moves to Istanbul to study, becomes an activist and a lawyer and a poet, and eventually a brilliant novelist whose books are translated to many languages. By the way, my friends from Barcelona, Karina, Jochen, and Ezra, Jochen and Ezra are from Turkey. They told me that there is even a book of yours translated into Catalan. So what was the most challenging on your way to the point where you are right now?
Oh gosh!
It's such a big, long way. You know, you had to change your caterpillar turning into a butterfly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for this banal comparison, but it is.
Yeah, I think when you get a certain point, you don't think that you had challenges in the past. They were just the corners that you needed to turn around, or just a hill you have to walk up. I think changing cities was maybe the most difficult and also the most, let's say, adventurous thing. When we moved to a small town from the small village, it was like flying to moon, because my village was very small with 50 households, and you come to a town of 10,000 people, and people don't know each other. How people don't know each other? They live in the same place. That was, the strange and the challenging thing. And of course, at the time, it was also the place of my new language, because my Turkish was just so simple. We could speak only Kurdish. And when I was a teenager, I went to Istanbul to study law. I was 17 years old, and I had not a single person that I knew, and I had no place to stay. And suddenly I found myself in another universe, coming from a small town in Anatolia, in a provincial area, and just going into heart of, let's say, modernity or the new age. It was an interesting experience. And you will then actually you needed to recreate yourself all the time. Environment is new, people are around you are new, and then you need to have something new in your spirit, in your soul. That was challenging.
Do you ever go back to the village, at least sometimes? Do you still have relatives there?
Yes, every year, every summer, harvest time, I go to the village and I help my family. I was there just 3 months ago for the harvesting with my brothers and my mother's sister. Yes, I love it.
Just to give us a little bit taste of Kurdish culture, could you say what is your favorite Kurdish tradition?
I think Kurdish fairy tales and Kurdish singing. It is maybe because of my mom's, effect on my personality. Still, she's nearly 90 years old. Whenever we gather at home, she says, "Okay, now it's time for a story to you," and she starts, because our story is mostly told by singing, like old troubadour tradition, and she starts singing. Still, she does that. And in my writing, in my novels, of course, I reflect this intention or unintention. And she knows that. She said that, "Oh, you don't write anything belongs to you, just repeat my words." By the way, she's illiterate. She cannot read and write, but she knows what I'm writing.
That's amazing, and this is heartwarming to hear something like that. I was actually intentionally asking you about that because I knew you would say something about your mom. I know that she told you a lot of stories when you were a little kid. And even right now, you're saying that she's still telling you stories and even singing you the stories. Because when I read your novel, Istanbul, Istanbul, and I told you before we started live streaming that I finished reading the novel like 1 hour before our conversation. It's amazing, the storytelling. You are in the world, though the book is not very easy, right? Detainees, people in jail sitting below ground in Istanbul, but yet their fantasies, their imagination, their stories, you can almost feel the taste of your culture, you know? So I really wanted to ask you who affected you as a writer, and maybe why did you become a writer? And obviously the answer here is mom, your mom, maybe someone else when you were a little kid. But do you have anyone influencing you right now on your writing way? You are already a renowned writer. You influence a lot of people, I'm sure, but still maybe there is someone who influences you.
Yes, I think in the household it starts. My mother and my eldest brother, he is the most intelligent person in our household. When I was a little kid, he would always come home with books. I would see books in his hand. He was reading poetry, you know, reading novels and interested in that, books with pictures or without pictures. It was fascinating for me. I said, my mom would say everything by heart, but my elder brother is reading something, then sharing the things that he's reading with in his book with us. I think those two people are, you know, the creator of my life, I can say. And on top of that, of course, then you meet dead people like Dostoevsky or Kafka or Borges or, you know, Marquez, and you say that, oh, this world is so big. And you read again, you say, one life is not enough to appreciate the whole literature that, you know, this humanity created. I wish that we had another life just for reading books.
Yeah, I wish we had two. Exactly, for reading books.
Yes.
Which of your own book would you recommend for someone who hasn't read a book of yours, and why?
Oh, God.
What should we start with? I started with Istanbul, Istanbul, because I didn't have a chance to talk to you before. So, what would you recommend?
Of course, I would say Istanbul, Istanbul, because it is the easiest book to find. It's available in more than 40 languages. But I would recommend my latest novel, which is just coming in Italy next month, and after that coming in the United States, and then other countries like Germany, Netherlands, and France, and other places. Yes, the new novel after Istanbul, Istanbul. The new novel, by the way, is titled Stone and Shadow. Mm-hmm. And in that book, you will see some elements about your people, Armenians as well.
Wow, that's very interesting. Now I'm going to be definitely hunting for that book. I hope it will be in Malta.
Hopefully.
In English. From my side, of course, I read Istanbul, Istanbul an hour ago, finished, as I have said. Istanbul, it's a brilliant piece of literature with a distinct Eastern flavor, great storytelling. I really enjoyed my travel through the book, even though it is sincerely sad. Of course, there is lots of fantasies and imagination there, but it's definitely sad. But sad is what makes our heart grow bigger, right? Our soul grow bigger. Without it, we cannot grow a big soul. This is actually the end of our conversation, Burhan. I just have one more little favor. Could you please say something encouraging to the people of Ukraine?
Oh, it is, they should know that this is not the end. This is another turmoil that we have to go over it. And they should know that the war is not only in the territory of Ukraine. The war is across Europe, across Asia, in every household that we live in. We feel it. And that's why if we now fight for the freedom of Ukraine, that means that we are also fighting for our own freedom. And we have to succeed it for the sake of Ukrainian people and for the sake of people everywhere.
Thank you so much, Burhan. It was a pleasure talking to you at the International Literature Festival Odesa, which is taking place now in Georgia, in a beautiful city of Batumi. We are very grateful to Georgia for hosting the festival. And at the same time, we all hope to see the festival back in Ukraine next year. Thank you, Burhan, one more time. It was really great to talk to you. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you, Art. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
And I think they stopped the live streaming. One more time, Burhan, sincerely, thank you so much. I really am happy that I had this opportunity to talk to you and to get to know your art. And definitely I will read the new novel. I'm going to wait until the English version is here in Malta in the bookstores, and I will read it definitely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Art. I hope you will have a nice day. If you happen to come to London, this part of the